Hello, it is now 1:15 and I'm just going to get started right away. My name is Jamie Hurewitz and I am an attorney, formerly the vice president of legal for a startup called GitLab. When I started at GitLab, I was the first legal hire and I was brought in. There was about 150 employees at that time. And over the 2.5 years that I was at GitLab, we grew from 150 to over 1,200 employees. We went through about 3 rounds of fundraising, and we raised almost $500 million in capital. GitLab is a fully remote organization. We had team members in 60 plus countries. And so we had a lot of legal issues that came up at that time. So before I joined GitLab, there were no attorneys at that time. And so I'm here to talk about some of the common questions that come up with the startups, and also to kind of answer some of the questions that some of you might have. You can feel free to go through and ask any of your questions during the chat. I can answer them at the end. Otherwise, feel free to ask them at the end. We could do some live question and answer. So I will start off with, the mandated disclaimer here that these are my opinions only. They don't represent anyone else's opinions. The information here is not legal advice. I do not represent you. This is for informational purposes only. And if you have any questions that are specific to you or your companies, that you should seek out legal counsel. This is really, very general information, and every, fact is different. So really, I would advise you just to kind of take this as a starter piece of advice and then go forward. So the first question I have, I'm an early stage startup. Do I need to be concerned with legal questions? So as I'm sure most of you are aware, most companies' decisions have the potential for legal consequences. So I'm going to go through a couple of hypothetical issues that you probably are seeing on a regular basis. And I'm not going to go through the answers. I just want you to think about these things and whether you can spot the legal issues, and whether you see, I will tell you in advance, there are legal consequences for each of these scenarios. And you think about it, these are happening in your businesses every single day. And if you don't see a legal issue in them, then that's for you to see, like, hey, yeah, we're doing legal things every single day and we didn't even know it. So example 1, your team receives a support call from a customer whose account has hacked and email is changed. The user can no longer access his or her account and ask your support agent to revert the account back to his or her old email address. The user also asks if the agent can provide him or her with the username and IP address of the user who hacked it, because they really want to go after that account because they're pissed. What should your support agent do? Can they provide with this information? So, that's something that I'm sure many support team members have calls that come in. There's legal issues there. What are your team members doing? Another scenario, your engineering team wants to hire an MIT student who is an Iranian citizen living in Cambridge, and they're on a student visa for a UX internship. Can you hire them? More legal issues. Is that something that you would think about before you put forward that hiring offer? Another example, after a year-long negotiation, your company just finalized getting a federal contract with the GSA procurement, allowing you to sell directly to the federal government. Congratulations, that's a huge deal if you don't know that. You're so excited because this just opened up so many doors for you in your federal sales team, and the deals are just going to start flooding in. As luck will have it, your largest commercial customer's contract just came in for renewal, and you decided to renew it, increasing your subscription by 3 times. However, they want to renegotiate the terms, and they want a most favored customer clause. Is this a problem? If you don't know the answers, there's legal issues with that. So the decisions that the business decisions that you're making every single day have legal issues. And so that's why, lawyers are important, and some of the decisions that you're making well in advance of bringing on your attorneys all have legal implications. So what are the types of legal issues that you'll come across that you should be thinking about as an early stage startup? There's lots of them. And, some of your early ones that you're going to deal with are obviously starting your corporation. You're going to create a corporation. You're going to have your articles of incorporation, your shareholder agreements, bylaws. You got to worry about protecting your IP. You're not putting all of this hard work into it for nothing. You want to make sure you protect everything. You're going to have your employment agreements, intellectual property protections, patents, equity plans, fundraising, securities documents, customer agreements, vendor agreements, tax considerations, litigation, employee disputes. But what are the top avoidable legal issues for startups? Because you don't want to be dealing with any of that, right? Like, you are dreamers. You want to worry about growing your business and these problems that you want to solve. The legal issues are not what you want to be concerned about. The main legal concerns that you should really want to be dealing with are protecting your dreams, right? You don't want to forget about protecting the IP. And then obviously the things that you can do to protect your rights. You come up with an idea with your founders. Make sure you have everything in writing. Make sure that you're protecting your products with your customers and your early employees. And then obviously some of the other business issues like taxation, and make sure you're doing that all correctly, because you don't want to go into these business agreements and then not have protections protecting the hard work that you're spending so much time working on, and then end up, having to pay for it later. So there's a lot of this work that you just really can't do on your own, and then there's some that you can just do on your own. There's a lot of resources out there. So it's really a matter of, when should I spend the money on professional services and have the work done outside, or when can I just do the work myself? There's a big tendency to think that, I could just find something online, find templates, do it myself, and that mentality, because I'm entrepreneurial and I can find some way to do it. But there's a lot of risks associated with the do-it-yourself mentality. So I would say that, complex matters that have, a lot of repercussions for what the outcome is going to be, you really should depend on the experts. With the corporate formation documents, setting up the legal entity, yes, that's pretty simple. You can go online and go to the Secretary of State, figure out how to set up a entity. But you really want to talk to your tax experts to find out what's the best type of entity for you, which state is the best state for you to incorporate in, or set up an LLC in. So there's different repercussions for each different type of entity. So that's where you want to talk to the expert on. But to save yourself some of those expenses, that's where you want to speak to a professional. The same thing with the formation documents. It's easy to go find templates for bylaws, and you might think that, hey, they're all the same, but you might have some different, ideas about how you want to set up that formation, what kind of equity plan you want to set up, and how you want to form that. And, there's certain things that if you don't get it right, then it's going to hurt you later. And I'll tell you, every single founder right now, if you don't know what an 83B election is right now, then I would tell you to go research that now, because that's something that will save you a lot of money. And I know a lot of people who didn't know about it and ended up paying for it later. Fundraising, that's another thing that you're going to need a professional to help you with, because there's a lot of founders who end up losing out on their shares, of the business that they've been working so hard to build, because they end up losing a lot of their rights during the fundraising process, just based on dilution of their shares and giving up ownership rights of their shares if they don't have a good attorney helping them with that process. And then also setting up their templates and their agreements, just making sure they have strong agreements. The day-to-day stuff, yes, you can go and review your contracts. You could just solve disputes with your customers because those are really your business decisions. You can go and even create the templates because there's plenty of legal resources out there online where you can get the templates, but the templates don't know what your risks are of your business, and they don't know what your individual product is. They don't know how you want to protect it. They don't know the way that you're selling your product. They don't know your industry. They don't know the specifics. And so they don't know how to protect you and your company. So while you can start off and save a lot of money for yourself by setting up the framework, you really should seek some guidance from an expert to help customize it for you and your company. But I'm not a lawyer. How can I do the work? It's all about balancing risk. And that's something that some people are more comfortable with than others. And risk can be scary for some people, and some people are much more tolerable to risk. And so I like to talk about compliance as one of them. A lot of startups don't even think about compliance. And I'll talk about some of my experience, especially with my last place at GitLab. I started at GitLab when I was the first attorney, and they had no compliance program in place. And the management team was rather nervous about GDPR, privacy, and everything that was on the horizon when I started. And I had to kind of level set them and bring them down to, our planet. GitLab was at the time a Series B company and had, very little exposure because they weren't Facebook, they weren't Google. No one was looking at GitLab. No one really knew about GitLab. When I started at GitLab, there wasn't very much information about GitLab. And talk about my first day at GitLab, I had never worked at a remote company before. And I couldn't really find that much information about GitLab. And I really just kind of took the job because my husband had convinced me to. I was actually pretty skeptical about startups to begin with because I'd never worked for a startup. And my idea of a startup was, a bunch of poor college students who were sitting around in one office, sharing office space and eating pizza because they couldn't afford meals. And I had a family, and I needed to support, and a mortgage I needed to pay, and I didn't think it was very stable. And my husband was like, just do it, just apply. And I said, but they are, a global, they're looking for a global position. And I'm like, what are the odds? And he's like, just apply. So I ended up applying, and I ended up getting the job. And so my first day, I'm sitting in this office right here, and I didn't know who to contact for anything. I just had bought my computer that I was supposed to get reimbursement for, bought my desk, set up this office, and didn't know who. There's no like IT support or anything. And so I'm sitting here, and I thought for sure I got conned out of my job to take this position because there was no information. But I took a chance, and 2.5 years later, it's a $2.5 billion company with 1,200 employees. And, the risk exposure is a little bit higher now, and we do things to mitigate some of the risk, but it's really about balancing with what you're comfortable with. And so at the time when I started, we didn't really necessarily have to focus on the same sort of risk, because was anyone going to come and look at what GitLab was doing for privacy versus now that they're on a more global level, what they're doing. So when you're starting out, no one's going to be concerned necessarily everything that you're doing at that point. There's no one, first of all, no one that's ever going to be 100% compliant with anything. So you can rest assured, be comfortable with that. But the government and anyone, the regulators, they just want to make sure that you're doing your best efforts. And so balancing risk, making sure that you feel comfortable that you're doing the best that you can and what you're comfortable with. So whether you can do the legal work, and whatever that you can take on, it's going to be up to you, and it's going to be your assessment and what you think that you can manage. So what are some of the things that you should look out for when you're doing some legal work? Some of them, obviously, one of the most important things is going to be your intellectual property rights. You wouldn't be here, you wouldn't be putting your hard work into this company that you're trying to put together if it wasn't for the product, the service, whatever it is that you believe is going to solve somebody's problem. And so first and foremost, you want to protect your intellectual property. Whether that means that you're going to be putting together some patents, some copyright, trademark, trade secrets, whatever it is, whatever the document, you're not transferring it in any way, you're not signing it off. Oh, sorry, a black screen. Let's see. Sorry, was that not in there? It was, I saw it as one of the individuals in the, can you see that though? I do have I can provide a link to the presentation. I can provide that for anyone who wants that as well. Okay. So intellectual property rights, you want to make sure that you protect those. And then, thanks, Michael, for that. I wish someone would have spoken up sooner. But also indemnification obligations. For anyone who doesn't know what indemnification is, indemnification means that you're going to step into the shoes of somebody else, and you're going to pay for those damages as if you were taking on the obligations for someone else. And so one example is for a breach, a data breach. So if I agree to indemnify you for any data breach, means that if you're breached and I agree to indemnify you, I'm going to pay for all of the expenses that you incur during your data breach. It is a huge responsibility, and it is endless, and I have no control over it. No, it's it can be unlimited, and so anytime you sign up for indemnification, it includes all of the attorney's fees. It can be any, unless if there's no limitation on it, it can be all inclusive. And so you really want to watch out, because that kind of exposure it can make or break your company and how you're going to pay for that. So when you see indemnification obligations, if you don't have the funds to back that, you want to make sure that you're not covering that. And that brings me to the next one, which is the limitations on liability. You want to make sure on your end that you're limiting your liability. And then on the opposite end, if someone's limiting their liability to you, you want to make sure that it's not limited in a way that you won't be covered. You want to make sure that you're going to get enough coverage from somebody else so that if they were to harm you, you're not limited, that they're not going to be restricted from paying you what they might owe you. And then finally, just any covenants, warranties, guarantees that you might be required to make on someone. Can you meet those? Can you really guarantee what you're saying that you can guarantee or warranty to someone? There's a large tendency for startups to be pressured into these types of agreements and guaranteeing and indemnifying for everything and anything, just because of the small nature and just to get the business done. They want to get their first, second, and third deals done just so they can have customers. And again, that goes back to the risk, balancing the risk. Can we do this? Should we do this just so we could get our first customers? A lot of companies will say, yeah, we need to do it. We need to sign up for this, whatever it takes, so we can get a customer. And others will be a little bit more reluctant. Again, it's going to be balancing the risk, but these are the things that you're going to want to think about as you're moving forward with growing your company and what kind of exposure you're willing to take. When should I hire my first legal counsel? So hopefully now you've raised some funds right now and you have some money to spend. This is not going to be one of your first hires. It's not even going to be your second, third, fourth, or 10th hire after you've done some fundraising. But there's no right or wrong answer. The timing is going to be different for every company. You're going to want to look at some things to consider. Are you using outside legal counsel already? How much? What's their current spend on the outside legal counsel? What industry are you in? Is it a heavily regulated or a regulated industry? Because if that's the case, then you probably are going to want to have someone, an expert in the legal inside, because it's easier to have someone who's an expert to deal with those issues than to continuously use outside. And it's probably expensive too. What are the complexity of your transactions that you're doing? And is it something that's beyond the capabilities of your founders or your other executives that are doing the legal work on the inside? What's the bandwidth of your founders or your executives that are doing the legal work on the inside? Those are all the considerations that you're going to consider on when to bring that attorney in. And it's not going to be the same for every company, but those are the things to consider. You'll know when the right time is, and you'll most likely, after you've done some fundraising, get a little bit of pressure from your investors, and when they think that some of the risks that you're taking on will warrant bringing on an attorney, because that's one of the main roles of an attorney, is to help with those decisions on how to best manage and mitigate risks. I've put together some resources that you could use for when you're doing your own work outside. Some good places to look if you're looking for some patent information or trademark searches. When you're looking for trademarks, want to figure out a new name for your company, good places to look is the Trademark Office website, and that's the uspto.gov. They have a test search on there where you can go look up to see if there's other trademarks already in place. And then also, if you are looking for information on how to establish your company, business filing information, see if there's other companies with the same name as what you're looking to name your company. Then you just go to the Secretary of State website for whatever state it is that you decide that you want to register your company in. I had alluded to previously about legal forms. You can find lots of documents on different kinds of company agreements, corporate agreements, customer agreements, NDAs, licensing agreements, and that there's a dime a dozen. The Rocket Lawyer, FindLaw, LegalZoom, Creative Commons. That's an open source one. And then one thing that a lot of companies don't think about is export. Export law is a big one that tends to get overlooked by many startups. And that's, you go look at some export resources. And then another item that tends to get overlooked early on is the securities laws. We think that securities laws don't apply until you decide to go public. Not so true. If you decide you want to have some early angel investors, or you want to give some shares to your family members in a private offering, all of that is also governed by securities laws as exceptions. So you need to make sure that you're doing that properly. So making sure that you get those exemptions to the IPO in the public law offering. So that is also the case. And then getting on major law firm mailing lists. They are a huge resource for information, and that's a good thing as well. Like DLA Piper, Baker McKenzie, Latham Watkins. Another thing to consider is, and this is, could be good, could be bad, it's up to you. There's a lot of major law firms that are willing to provide legal services for free as outside legal counsel. in return for, once you get to a certain stage, then you reimburse them. They'll do all of the early documentation, the startup documents for free, and then I say free, but then once you get in a later stage, that's when you start paying. But their fees are extremely expensive, and so you end up paying it, whereas you might find a lower priced law firm that would be willing to do it at lower rates. So you get the brand name lawyers, but at a premium. So those are other options to consider as well. So I just think that you have lots of different things to consider, but there's always something to consider from a legal perspective, just to make sure that you're protecting yourselves while you're putting all of this hard work into establishing your companies. And I will leave the rest of this presentation up for questions, and if anyone has any. And I will say that you can either put your questions in the chat, or if you want to share your audio and video, you can you can ask to join, then ask them live. Dustin, did you want to, you're free to just come live, or you can.
Hi, Jamie.
Hi, Dustin. How are you?
Good. How you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks.
Yeah, I've been listening on and off as best as I could, so I don't know
That's okay.
if I covered this topic or not. But I'm a founder. I'm building a tech startup, and we have a small device that is a little different than other devices in the market, of course. And I'm just wondering if I should try to get a utility patent or a design patent.
So if you want, so when you're talking about patents, you want to, I would tell you that the new rules are the first to file. So if you're at all concerned about protecting your patents, you'll want to consult with a patent attorney and make sure you do it rather quickly, to make sure that you're not doing it, that you don't lose out on the opportunity in case there's anyone else in the market that might be working on something that's similar, because you don't want to lose those protections. It used to be whoever was the first to, it didn't used to be first to file. So you want to make sure that you get it filed quickly and first, if anyone else is working on it.
Okay. And a provisional patent, would that be acceptable?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, but that only covers like the utility. Is that I don't really know the difference between the utility and the design and how you differentiate those two. That's why I was a little confused.
So, and that's something that a patent attorney would be able to consult on.
Okay.
And they would be able to tell you which would be the preferred way to protect your intellectual property. But either way, timing is what's most important when it comes to patents.
Okay. Yeah. So just get it done ASAP.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Thank you.
You're welcome. Chris, did you want to come on? Or did you just want me to ask your question? So Chris asked, building on that, what about filing for trademarks, such as protecting brand assets, colors? Oh, yep. So Chris asked, what about filing for trademarks, such as protecting brand assets, colors? When should a startup do that? So, you could do that at any time. Trademarks are really much easier to protect. So if you're talking about assets, trademarks, there's a difference between protecting the name and then the logo. You would have to file for both. And the easiest way to start would be to, like I said, I provided that website for the uspto.gov, and I can provide after this the link to the slides, but it's on that last page. And let me go back to that. So the uspto.gov, if you go to the trademark search, it's TESS is the name. If you go do preliminary searches and just make sure that there's no current active trademark, what they look for in that is active in a similar industry, similar product offering, not likely to confuse with your own product offering, industry, company, then it wouldn't be any kind of infringement issue. And so then once you do that search, that would save you time with working with an attorney, or if they have services that are much cheaper than working with attorneys to file that trademark for you. And then you have to determine where you're going to file. Is it going to be just a US protections? Do you want to file it globally? I'm sure at this point, you limit it to certain jurisdictions. US might be enough for you right now, but you want to, the earlier the better, because then you have the protections now and you don't have to worry about, it doesn't cost a lot to file trademarks. So if you want to get those protections early, that's great. Trademarks are a little bit different, especially because you could get those protections without having to actually register them. There's certain protections that are greater when if you register them versus just using them. But it's more protective to register them. So, but the first search that you could do is with the test to make sure that there's no one else already using them, so you wouldn't be infringing on them. But like I said, it's not very expensive to register a trademark if you wanted to do that. I don't know if you have any further questions upon that, but another thing to think about is that sometimes as you're pivoting, you might change your ideas about what you want for your trademark and your products. And so to keep that in mind, if you have any other follow-up questions, Chris, that's kind of where I come from. I know. Does anyone else have any questions? I used to work at a video game company, and I used to have to do this preliminary trademark searches all the time, every time they would come out with a new video game. And so we had a lot of fun with that. Thank you, Emily. Dustin and Chris, I don't know if you saw, Emily Wessels made a recommendation for a former colleague of hers, Paige Stradley at Merchant & Gold, for some IP assistance. If anyone else wants to reach out to me on LinkedIn, I'm also able to make additional recommendations and referrals for any kind of attorneys, IP attorneys as well, or any other kind of specialists that they might need. Well, if anyone has any more questions, I'd be happy to answer them. If anyone wants to reach out to me offline, I'm also available. You can contact me through LinkedIn. Happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, I'd be happy to give you back some of your time. I hope you are enjoying this conference and taking advantage of all the information that you're learning and the networking. So you're welcome, Michael, and have a great day.